But really, you have to stop giving away this firmware, this software, or these apps. You need to pivot towards a recurring revenue model.
More and more manufacturers have started to pivot or are considering a pivot to add recurring revenue to their business model. That trend has probably accelerated a lot over the past 2 years with the supply chain disruptions. A lot of companies impacted by unpredictable costs of materials, components, unpredictability of supply. So these are additional factors pushing manufacturers towards recurring revenue models, at least as a part of their business. Any comment on that trend and things you've seen in the market?
Yeah, I mean, this is a trend that's been going on for more than a decade now. And it's all about providing value-added services to your customers to complement the hardware that you're already selling to them. And it's really also about creating stickiness with your customer base. Not only do you want to sell hardware once every few years, or maybe a couple of times a year, you want to have that engagement with your customers on an almost daily basis through a SaaS offering. And of course, that translates into steady revenue, which everyone's looking for these days.
Yeah, and so we are gonna dive deeper into the SaaS offering, but before we get there, so there's a few ways manufacturers are getting that recurring revenue piece. Super traditional way, things like extended warranties, preventive maintenance, lease, rental of equipment. Another one that's traditional is the consumables. So with the good old example of the ink cartridges for the printers. But what's been, I would say, gaining a lot of speed, which you alluded to, is the SaaS model or the IoT model. That often applies to manufacturers with more high-tech products or solutions. So let's dive a bit deeper into that piece.
Yeah, so first of all, there's the offer piece. You've been selling hardware. Maybe on this hardware, you were providing some firmware. Maybe you were providing desktop software to manage your hardware. And obviously, then you may be providing some sort of an app, cloud play, IoT play. But really, you have to stop giving away this firmware, this software, or these apps. You need to pivot towards a recurring revenue model. And that's really, the first step, which is kind of obvious. But then there's all of the other infrastructure and processes that you need to think about in order to sustain and enable this new SaaS play.
Right. So if you have a new business model that you want to your business, you need something to support it beyond the offer. So it impacts a lot of the departments of companies. And here, so Louis, I'm going to ask your input, your directions. So what every business function needs to do to support that go-to-market of SaaS play. Let's start with sales. So if you're used to selling products, now you're going to sell recurring software. That's a completely different ballgame in many aspects.
Well, that's where it's super important from a sales perspective to be very, very focused on the customer experience. What is it that you're going to sell to your customers? So you need to think about payment terms. Is it monthly, annual, pay as you go, usage-based payments? So you need to define those different pricing models. You need to educate your sales teams on those pricing models. Then you need to think about how are you going to be collecting? Is it a standard net 30 like you've always been doing with your hardware or PO-based? Or are you going to offer customers the flexibility of paying with their credit card online and making it a very, very streamlined process? So these are just some of the key things that you need to think about from a customer experience perspective.
And is there a reskilling that's needed in terms of they're used to sell products, now they have to sell software? Of course, it's going to depend company on company, but what do you typically see in the market?
Yeah, there's definitely some training that needs to happen to properly educate your sales team as to how to pivot from selling hardware to selling subscriptions. So there's definitely things there that need to be properly planned. But the most important thing is you don't want your sales team to be handling renewals. So you need to automate this process. And let's just look at a typical example. If you have 10 or 100 customers, you can have your sales team manage those renewals. But hopefully you have tens of thousands or a lot more customers. That renewal process on a yearly basis can really overburden your sales team. And so you need to properly plan this process, and you need to automate it as much as you can so that your sales team is really focused on selling to new customers, upsell and cross-sell, and all of your renewals are fully automated with your infrastructure.
And that might impact also another department, which is customer service. Sometimes they share responsibilities with the same sales team, so conceptually it might be similar. How do you need to upgrade your customer service to manage a new SaaS recurring revenue model in your business?
Well, the first thing you need to do is you need to provide your customer service team with the Customer 360. And so they need to know what customers bought, which type of license. Maybe they need access to usage data, for example. So they need to have that information at their fingertips. And then you need to make sure that you're planning entitlements. What type of entitlements are you allowed to get as a customer when you call in? Are you getting premium support, basic support? Is there some sort of an SLA in place? What about advanced replacements? How do you handle those? Are you entitled to those? So making sure that you've documented all those processes, hopefully automated most of them, and making sure, again, that your team has that information and that Customer 360 vision.
Everybody who says new offer, new business model implies promoting it. So if you're going to roll out a SaaS to complement your product business, what do you need to do in terms of marketing?
Yeah, marketing is critical. You've been selling hardware maybe for years now, and all of a sudden you want to entice your customers to buy an annual license or a subscription. It's hard. You need to plan this, you need to market, and you need to entice these customers to join in on your new plan. And things like free trials, freemium plans, anything to get your customers to taste and try it out, see the value-added services that you're providing them, and then get them hooked. So that marketing strategy will be key in making sure that you're going to be getting the maximum out of this new offer.
You've discussed sales, customer service, marketing. So once your new business model is up and running, of course, you want to tie that back to other of your operational systems like accounting and possibly your ERP. So can you discuss that piece?
Yeah. Well, the first thing you need to think about from an accounting perspective is contract amendments and consolidated billing. Again, the example, if you have a customer that has, a half a dozen of your product, and maybe they're buying subscriptions for those products at different periods of the year. If you're sending them 6 renewals or 6, invoices, not a big deal. But if you have a customer that has hundreds or thousands of your products, and they're buying those licenses scattered throughout the year, all of a sudden you're sending them probably hundreds or thousands of invoices. That's not acceptable. Customers will not accept that. And that's where you need to prorate your licenses, maybe have them all align so that they're renewing at the same date. Maybe the concept of consolidated billing, where you're sending one invoice for all of those renewals for the month or the quarter or the year. So you need to think about these processes, and you need to put them in place before you launch your new SaaS model.
Anything else from an accounting perspective?
Yeah, let's not forget revenue recognition. So again, it's so important before you launch your SaaS offer that you think about the structure for your revenue recognition. Now you're selling software maybe for an annual, sometimes maybe a couple years. How are you going to recognize this revenue? How are you going to be planning this structure and making sure that hopefully, again, you can automate a lot of the revenue recognition in your backend systems.
All right, so we've covered a lot of the supporting piece in terms of business function of rolling out the new business model. And there's a lot of moving pieces. And you might say, oh, but what do I need new tools? Do I need new tools for my sales team, my customer service team, my marketing team, etc., to support that new business model? Now, if you have a strong platform, strong CRM like Salesforce, you're already managing those business functions with your CRM. And that's, I would guess, the good news is if you're using that, you can simply add the personalizations that you need for every department to run that new business model. So instead of being a mountain, it's actually a few tweaks for every department to run it. You don't have to overhaul your entire business infrastructure to support a new business model. Any thoughts on that?
So from a sales perspective, it's as easy as just creating a sales path with guided selling to support your new SaaS offering. From a support perspective, same thing. All you want to do is create new case flows for your SaaS offering. From a marketing perspective, you want to make sure you're properly segmenting your customers so that you're enabling your marketing team to reach out to these customers with the right message and personalizing it.
Yeah, and so I would say those are the low-hanging fruits if you have a CRM like Salesforce. Let's go a bit further on, I would say, probably our last two topics to address. If I think of consumer apps, I can manage my subscription directly from the app. So that's not always the case from a B2B software perspective. Many software, they won't enable the addition of users, purchasing a lot of license from within the software. And so this is where your CRM, if I'm being more precise, a portal that's connected to your CRM can help your customer with self-service. So how important is enabling customers with self-service when you're pushing a SaaS offer to market?
Yeah, David, it's so critical. Customers expect this from a modern SaaS offering. They expect a self-service portal where they can go in, buy their licenses, add licenses, enable new features. And they expect that as soon as they buy and they pay with their credit card, that license or that new feature is enabled right away. So auto provisioning, integration to your backend systems is a critical piece to your SaaS offering.
And you mentioned the last point, so integration with your backend system. We're actually seeing this either done or on the roadmap of many of our customers. Integrating the backend of their software offering to their Salesforce CRM. Now, what that enables to do is, if you have usage data in the CRM, sales, customer service, marketing, and other business function can now give tailored service to these customers based on their actual usage of the product. So comment on that, give examples, so on.
Well, you said it very well, David. It's again, I come back to this customer 360 view. Now what you're doing is, because you're getting the usage data from your customers, how they're interacting, what features they're using, how they're using your product and your new SaaS offering, you're providing this information to your different departments. And so from a sales perspective, I know which features my customer's using. I can call them up, upsell them new features, cross-sell, use this to hopefully get more engagement with them. From a customer support or maybe customer success perspective, I can use, again, this usage data to properly enable and help my customers, guide them to use and get more out of these value-added services. And if they get more value out of them, obviously, they'll come back next year, or they may buy more. And same thing from a marketing perspective. If you know which services they're using, which services are providing value to them, you can use this for further segmentation and further personalization to engage with them in a much more meaningful way.